This presentation is one I've used around the world the last few years since I took over the RLA in 2016. As Michael was starting to say, we are a member association. That's all we do. We bring together the retailers and the manufacturers who make stuff and sell stuff and get stuff back, not generally in the food industry, but other industries, consumer goods, and then all of the amazing third-party service partners and solutions providers who are coming up with ways to slow down returns, do something good with them, and be part of the massive circular economy that's growing. This is an office. We're based in Atlanta, Georgia, USA, but we are global. We've been around the world with events, and we'll talk about one coming up in Amsterdam later this year in June, as well as others in Nashville and Las Vegas. And we've done Singapore, Brazil, Italy, India, many other countries over the years, because as Michael alluded to and said in the statement, we are the only authoritative body out there. And it's nice, but it's also a burden. I did this at Phillips for years, and now I'm trying to get the rest of the world to realize you can reduce returns and save the planet and all those important things. So let's put the slide deck up. As Michael said, this is about the e-commerce hangover, which is something I've been talking about for years. And it's only in the last 2 years that it has become a tsunami of returns. We'll talk about that. But as it says, I'm the executive director. I've been doing this. I took over the RLA in 2016 when it was almost gone. We have built it back up with members, with board members that are global companies like Cisco, HP, and Dell. We'll talk a little more about that. We are easy to find on the web, rla.org. You can join the community at no cost. When you visit that, it takes only a couple minutes, and there are membership benefits that we can also talk about. I think I just said a lot of what's on the screen. We do offer a lot of information, industry research, solutions. We facilitate networking opportunities via number one, RLA Connect, which is an anonymous posting, and also via introductions. Our advisors are trained to help introductions happen. And again, you can join at rla.org at no cost. So what is reverse logistics? I still have a hard time explaining to people in my family what reverse logistics is. The simplest explanation is when you buy something at the store and you walk out the door, everything that happens after that is part of the reverse logistics ecosystem. Because number one, you might have trouble making it work, the packaging. Number two, it doesn't work the way you thought it would. You take it back to the store. That's the initial step, taking it back or shipping it back. And unfortunately, when we disposition many products, and I worked for Phillips for 25 years in sales, and I only thought about shipping things out the door. I never really thought about when it comes back. When it comes back, many of these products work like new. No technical fault found, which is very expensive, especially for a high-tech company like Phillips. And to put some perspective here, I was taken out of sales and marketing, where I was a happy guy, and told to fix the returns problem at Phillips North America. We were a $2 billion company, averaging around 11-12% return rates. That was in 1999. Within 3-4 years, I had brought it down to about a 4% rate. And it wasn't just luck. It was a lot of hard work that we'll talk about. But in this ecosystem, the dispositioning is a major factor. What happens to these goods? Well, they can be repaired, refurbished. They can be repackaged for sale as new or as refurbished. They get resold in many secondary markets, we call them. They can be reused for parts, for pieces, for other economies, other regions in the world, and it can be recycled, which is our least attractive. But everything that happens after the sale is an aspect of reverse logistics. And unfortunately, that means as many as 20 vendors carriers, storage, touch points occur on the reverse side versus on the forward side. When you make something, the estimate is about 5 to 7 touches before it gets to a consumer. All right, the overview. So I've been telling this story, as I said, for years, and the numbers are getting worse. If you make it easy for people to shop online, they will. And the returns are easily 3 to 4% the rates of brick and mortar stores. And these numbers are getting worse. The ticking time bomb is that people now are spoiled. And I'm not sure if the US exported this to the rest of the world like we did with our Walmart operations and our Costco operations, the mega retailers who've made it really easy for people to buy things and take it back with no hassle. What we've done is we've created a culture of entitlement. And that can be okay if you go in a store and you buy something and you know if it doesn't work at home, you can take it back. That can be okay. But when you start to introduce shipping and 30% of the shoppers find it difficult to handle returns online, 51% think it's too complicated, 46% think that dropping off a parcel at a UPS store, or in the US, you can drop it off at Whole Foods or Kohl's or FedEx or lots of places, they find it inconvenient. Nobody wants to pay for a return. That's the other nightmare we've created: free shipping, free returns. The other parts of the ticking time bomb of e-commerce retailing, 25% of consumers return online goods more than 10% of the time. They are serial offenders. 24% think a post office would be okay. 38% would like the company to pick it up. 12% are okay going to a store, and 17% maybe drop it off at their local 7-Eleven. But basically, over 80% of the consumers shop more at those retailers who make the returns process easier. And that's the culture of entitlement we have created. It is a nightmare. Average returns, and I'm sorry this is a bit older, 2019, before the pandemic really hit, but the trend is still there that electrical products, 10% of the time, homeware, meaning home goods like small electrics, 10% of the time, furniture, Wayfair and other retailers like that. The nightmare of furniture, you can all imagine. You look at a picture on the screen, and that's really what online is about, everyone. You are transforming a two-dimensional experience like we're doing now with a Zoom rather than being in person. So you don't know if I'm short, tall, bald in the back. I mean, it's a two-dimensional experience on Zoom. It's two-dimensional buying a product. And then, you know, something shows up at your door. It's in a box. You open up the box, you touch it, you feel it, you pick it up. Is it what you thought it would be? And because we all come to a screen like this with our own expectations, when we get the package at the door, it's a new set of expectations. So return rates, you know, these are more than double and triple the rates at brick and mortar. So keep that in mind. Health and beauty. I mean, think about that. Cosmetics are coming back. Travel and sports equipment, crazy. That's luggage, that's sporting goods, etc. But here's the killer, and this is a low number: fashion. This has been spearheaded by companies like Zappos and not just Amazon, but other retailers who encourage you, like Rent the Runway and other wardrobe programs. Buy as many clothes as you think you want. The sizes, the bracketing nightmare that occurs, you're buying a size larger than you think you need, a size smaller than you think you need. You're buying multiple colors. So fashion is 25 to 40% return rates. And if you're in the apparel industry, it's a nightmare. Now, in addition to this nightmare, this tsunami of volume of returns, costs are going up, right? The last 2 years, everything's been inflation, but 31% of retailers managing their returns process says it is impacting their profit. Well, I knew this 20 years ago at Phillips. Again, imagine 11% of your goods coming back And these are expensive televisions and DVD players and computers and monitors, and it's real expensive stuff. And when it comes back, you can't resell it as new. Now, that's a different discussion about what can be sold as new, but the government in the USA and many other parts of the world say once something's been plugged in and turned on, it can no longer be sold as new. So imagine how expensive that is for a 10% returns rate of a $2 billion company. 33% of the retailers have had to increase their prices to counter the increasing returns volumes. The numbers are staggering. I'll give you some in a moment. 30% of the shoppers, like I just indicated, over purchase, expecting to return unwanted items. That's the culture entitlement that people are experiencing. Why? Because a company like Zappos in the United States sells shoes online. They tell you buy 10 pair, keep 9, return the rest. They're happy if you do that. Is that profitable? Maybe in the short term, because Zappos became a major player in the online industry, but at some point those costs are coming back. And 19% of shoppers admit to ordering multiples of the same item so they can decide at home. Why? Because your dressing room is now in your home, not in the store. A lot of that due to the pandemic, but a lot of that because people are being encouraged to do that. So these are some scary numbers. And if you're a manufacturer or a retailer, you're having to deal with this. If you're a third-party service provider, you're trying to make it easier and more efficient and more cost-effective for your clients to get the returns and handle them. If you've not been in a returns warehouse, here's what they can look like. The picture on the left, of course, is kind of a mess. These are pallets of returns from stores. When retail stores get delivered on the front side, there's usually a package or pallet like this of mixed goods on it. But here's something else. When I look at these racks and these pallets and these goods, I recognize each one of them is a bad customer experience. And that's the risk. And that's what's overcoming all of this now, is retailers are afraid to lose customers, so they will do anything to make that experience better. Now on the right side, when you see those pallets straight from the truck, that's how some of these products are being liquidated. They're being sold as is. Theoretically, that pallet, each of those pallets that you see in a photograph, there's a manifest that says these products are on this pallet. And the liquidation now is being dumped on the shoulders of retailers. The Walmarts, the Carrefours, the Media Markets, the Tesco's of the world, they're being given allowances now by manufacturers and being told, don't send it back to us. We don't want it anymore. We want you to get rid of it, and we'll give you an allowance to do that. And we were in that business at Phillips. And what I realized coming from the sales and marketing side is at the end of the year, when you give any company, whether it's Amazon or Carrefour, the biggest, the smallest, when you give them an allowance at the end of the year, not one company has ever said to us at Phillips, you gave us a 4% allowance, we only needed 3%, we're going to give you some money back. You are all in the financial world. You know what happens. They ask for more, and they ask you to make up for the last year of processing returns. Now, the nightmare, and I call it a nightmare because I've had to overcome my lack of financial background with getting beat up because nobody was looking at end-to-end costs. And financial people, especially CFOs, they like predictability. So a 4% allowance monthly on purchases is predictable. It's reliable until the end of the year when it comes back. And then the CFOs would charge back the sales organizations for those extended increased allowances. And so it gets to be a real battle. And I always said that if you're in reverse logistics, you need a best friend who's in finance that you can go out drinking with, because you need to understand the end-to-end costs. You look at those pallets, and the end-to-end cost is the shipping, the handling, the loss on the sale. One of my nightmares at Phillips was that the finance team did not reduce the pricing internal costs for old goods when a new line came out. And if you've been around the electronics industry or many other industries, consumer goods for a while, you know that new lines generally come out with a lower cost than the old line. So if the new line comes out at a lower cost and the old line is still in the inventory at the higher cost, it made me look like a failure, honestly, as a sales rep on selling return goods because I couldn't collect what the costs were. So those are the challenges in particular facing the financial review of the returns and reverse logistics industry. There are so many touch points that are unaccounted for that the end-to-end costs are rarely looked at. And then there's the allowance programs that are the death of any company that really goes with them for very long. I'll pause there and take a breath again. As Michael said, you can ask any questions, put them in the chat box, unmute yourself and speak up. But the other nice part about this is the success that you can have. So let's talk about how do you get to a successful returns management program. Again, just a review of the numbers. In the United States alone, and I'm sorry, I don't have figures for Europe and the Middle East or Asia yet. We're working on being that returns point of contact for all the numbers. But in the USA alone, returns from 2020 to 2021 jumped from 450 billion in 2020, 10%, to 760 billion in 2021, almost 17%. That's a 50% plus increase in returns. And at 761 billion, that's larger than the United States spends on the defense industry. It's larger than Amazon or Walmart in volume. It's enormous. That's because e-commerce grew. And e-commerce grew to about 19% of total retail sales in 2021. I'm sorry, I should update that number. Excuse me. But that's the tipping point. As the sales online go up and returns go up with them, as they increase their share of business, your returns just go up exponentially. If you're in finance, you need to be planning for this or needing to do something about it. Again, merchandise purchase online more than doubled. Retailers have a returns mentality, and they see it as a competitive advantage. I've told you all the story of Zappos and how they grew from zero to a multi-billion-dollar company in shoes online. And they grew tremendously because of that giveaway mentality that they gave. Excuse me. The other challenge, the newness, is the retail stores, the Home Depots of the world, the appliance stores, the clothing stores. They recognize that the online omni retailers, whether it's an Amazon or whether it's the other online retailers offer multiple product categories, the retailers had to respond. And they did. And they got smart. Retailers have been successful. The brick and mortar stores have been successful because they create an omni-channel program for people online shopping. So you can go online, and again, I'll use the example of a Walmart because that's almost all over the world. Go online, you can see it. You can see if it's at your local store, you can go pick it up, or your local store can ship it to you if you don't want to pick it up. And that omni-channel opportunity has meant that those retailers have stayed strong and will stay strong. In fact, they have an advantage now over Amazon in allowing you to pick up in the store at your convenience or be shipped to you. That's the omni-channel opportunity, but it also introduces complexity. Imagine buying something on Walmart.com that they don't carry in the store. Now you take it back to the store and the store has to deal with that. So there's a lot of complexity on the forward and the reverse side with this omni-channel opportunity. But those major players, those major global players are learning how to deal with it. But it is really tricky from a financial end as well. Who do you give credit to? Who do you give credit for the sale? And who do you nick for the return? Should that go against the store where the product was returned when it was sold online or shipped from another store? It gets complicated, and the financial world has to stand up even more to help this be accessible and work well. But that bottom line number, the cost of goods sold, expenses have driven up tremendously for returns. One more point, especially from the finance side, is the cost of goods has also led some financial business decisions that say, I gave you the number in the United States, that it's 760 billion plus in returns. Not all of that goes back into the liquidation pile. Some of that goes back on the shelves. The estimate is 40% or more can go back on the shelf as new. But the cost of goods has led some companies to make a decision that you tell the customer, keep the product and we'll give you full credit. That is a disastrous business decision, but they're looking at the average cost of one unit to be returned rather than looking at the entire universe of those products and thinking that, okay, if the customer has it and it's less than $50 and it's going to cost us $20 to get it back, is it worth it if we're only going to get $5 for it when we resell it? And there's some financial sense to that, unless you look at the big picture. And the big picture includes things like when you do that. Now, there's some clever bookkeeping going on. When you do that, you, of course, improve your carbon footprint. Why? Because you're not asking a customer to send it back. So you've dropped that carbon footprint and it's not going to be moved and touched 20 times or more. So you've got that carbon footprint. So there's some clever bookkeeping going on that says if you don't take it back, you improve your carbon footprint. But what else do you do? Well, you've given license to kill. You've given the consumer the opportunity to think, well, I'll order something because the odds are it's cheap. They'll never ask me for it back. They'll just give me the credit. I'll be a happy guy. And then I'll go sell it on eBay or Facebook Marketplace or at the local pawn shop or at the local flea market. And all of these hawker secondary market channels, there's going to be some entrepreneurs out there. Of the 761 billion, the number is small. It's estimated that 4 billion was given in credits rather than taking it back. But again, you represent a financial audience that needs to be thinking about this and taking into account if your company sells products or makes products. So expenses are high, shipping costs are high, labor is high, but you may be destroying your brand equity when you tell somebody, just keep it, we'll give you your money back. And I know this from personal example because when I was at Phillips, we had some allowance programs. We had been telling some people to keep the products, but we learned it was better to control our destiny, taking 100% of the goods back. One of the worst things that can happen is to see your goods in a landfill with your name visible in some third world country because you dumped it off and it wound up there. Or you get somebody who buys it at a flea market and calls you up and takes an hour of your call center time for a product that got sold secondary and in a flea market, and you're trying to help somebody fix something that no longer has warranty. And any way you cut it, it can be a bad experience because even though they didn't buy it from you or one of your authorized dealers, You have to talk to those people because your name is on the product. So if you care about the name that's on the product as a manufacturer, or you care about your retailer's name, you do everything you can to take care of the customer, and those costs are not being recognized end to end. That was the challenge for me at Phillips, is getting the company to understand some of that. And I did. I did become drinking friends with the finance guy. And we did a great job of reducing returns. So there's many, many, many silver bullets. Let's talk about them. Here's the example, case study kind of in the apparel industry. We talked about that bracketing. So people buy extra sizes, extra colors, and immediately 2/3 return rate, right? Because they buy a size bigger, a size smaller, keep one. You got 66% returns rate in clothing. Another silly example, but as a returns person, you need to learn everything that's possible that can go wrong. So people who use models on websites to sell clothing, like the picture here that I've got, returns are higher. You know why? Because people buy these things, they get it delivered to the door, they put it on, they stand in front of a mirror and say, oh my God, I don't look anything like that person. It doesn't fit on me like that at all. I'm returning it. And then I mentioned it's a two-dimensional experience. We just described it. So it's really about unmet expectations. And unlike the electronics industry, if you buy an Intel Core i5 computer, it's going to be the same Intel Core i5 on every brand that's out there. You can't say the same about clothing. You can buy Diana Kors, you can buy JCPenney brands, you can buy Macy brands, you can buy the Meridian brands at Target, you can buy all kinds of different brands of clothing, and a large on every brand will be sized different. And that's a nightmare. Plus you have seasonal returns. The apparel industry is fraught with this, that towards the end of the winter season, we get hit with a late snowstorm, ice storm, freezing cold. People go out and buy extra warm coats and boots and things just to get through it. And then when that's over and it's April and suddenly the sun comes out and it's 80 degrees, they take stuff back. And what does the retailer do with that product when it's out of season? They sell it at a loss, a bigger loss than if it had been October, November, December, January. And the time delay on shipping. It's a very complicated nightmare. As finance people, you need to take all of these factors into account. There's some solutions. Upcycling is the recycling version for the apparel industry, where there are factories in Europe now that will take clothing like on that rack and break it down to the raw materials, the raw fiber. Why? Because it takes a lot less energy and resources to reuse clothing materials, the fabric, to reuse it rather than create it new, cotton and wool, etc. So it's now crossed the threshold where upcycling makes sense rather than, unfortunately, burning clothes and other things that have occurred or throwing them into landfill. They don't break down very well. So upcycling. Now you've got manufacturers, whether it's Nike or Columbia Clothing or North Face, companies, and even some of the major brand names of clothing, they are now taking things back and selling them as pre-loved. And that's an interesting concept. Nordstrom, they're kind of a global retailer. Nordstrom in the US, their growth is coming from Nordstrom Rack stores, which is where they're sending their return goods to be resold at a discount, but they're attracting more customers because of the value that they represent. And also millennials and younger people have no issue buying pre-loved, pre-owned, and refurbished goods. There are consignment shops online and in retail and in brick and mortar. So people will take some of their unused, unworn, or no longer being used garments, and they're allowed to, on these luxury pre-owned sites, the Real, Poshmark, it's a new opportunity. So the premium brands are recognizing there is a market. So rather than just throwing away clothing to landfill or burning it like H&M and Burberry got caught doing in Europe, they're setting up this secondary site on their own site, allowing people to send old things back and buy something new with some kind of a credit. Nike will give a partial credit for old Air Jordan shoes that you can use to buy towards LeBron James shoes, for lack of a better comparison. There's also the importance of serializing these higher priced goods and using RFID tag tracking. I won't go into depth about the fraudulent counterfeit market. It's out there. Louis Vuitton, Michael Kors, Diane von Furstenberg, all of those premium brands have had counterfeiting occur. So they're getting used to the idea of creating serial number tags, RFID tags, so that they know if they take it back, it's something that they actually made or sold. So there's some solutions to reduce returns, prevent returns, and do something better with returns. So what's going to happen in the next few years? Well, is e-commerce going to slow down? No. So it's going to continue to grow and drive those overall return rates. Are retailers going to hassle customers on returns? Probably not. Although to some degree, even Amazon and the other online companies are learning they have to be careful about serial returners who are fraudulent. So there's tracking massive amounts of data about each and every one of us, right? They know if we order things 10 times in a row and we get credits for a few, and that we're potentially a customer that's creating fraud. And there's a lot of that out there. The manufacturers are looking to limit their liability, hence the allowance programs. Dangerous, but it does theoretically limit their liability. Regulations around the world are getting much more onerous. France has a repairability index. If you buy certain products, you can tell if it's a worse product for repair for the future. And so they're rating companies and products being made. And it's not exactly a regulation, but it's an example. There are other regulations, of course, the WE rules and the RoHS rules in Europe, because they're running out of space for landfills. So expenses will continue to grow. Oh my God, yes, with the rising cost of transportation and so on, absolutely. But on the bright side, again, the consumer's desire for secondary market goods has grown tremendously, at least in North America. There's all these magic stores, the bargain hunts, the big lots, the Ollie's Bargain Outlet, the treasure hunt stores. There's so many secondary market retailers that are thriving and doing well because of the returns. Now, the last couple of years have been a bit lean, but if you remember the warehouse full of pallets that I showed you earlier, there's actually a new business model, at least in this country, where people will buy a trailer of 26 pallets or multiple trailers. They'll literally unload it into a vacant store for the weekend, and they'll tell consumers, come on in. On Thursday, it's $5 per item. On Friday, it's $4 per item. On Saturday, it's $3 per item, and so on. And they have had mobs at these stores of people who are trained to look for their special opportunities. I laugh because the video that I've seen on CNBC and other news reports, people with binoculars in teams, and they're in line, they're at the door, they're ready to go in. One of them spots an air fryer that's on one pallet. One of them spots a Nintendo game on another pallet, and they will rush in to buy those products for $5 each on day one and turn around and resell them on Craigslist, eBay, etc. marketplace. So the consumers are getting trained into that secondary value. And again, it's a business model that's thriving right now. It offers retailers a quick liquidation. It offers the liquidators a quick opportunity to find a retailer that will take 10 truckloads for the weekend. And it creates a frenzy of excitement that we're missing these days. So so there's some of that going on. And as I explained earlier, brick and mortar stores shifting to omni-channel. It's a financial challenge and it's a supply chain challenge, but it's an absolute win-win for those brick and mortar stores to compete with the online only stores who, you see more and more of them opening up brick and mortar. So that's the next 5 years prediction. A little more here. Here's some examples of the stores I mentioned: the dirt cheap stores, the big lot stores, and of course, Alibaba, eBay, Best Buy. What is your trade-in worth? Things like that. So there's real growth in those programs. The retailers and the manufacturers are starting to sell refurbished, renewed, return goods. There's a consolidation of services into larger offerings. I said that half of our membership are the third-party solutions providers. And they're learning that you can't be a niche player in that space. If all you're doing is moving the returns as a carrier and not doing anything else to help the manufacturer, the retailer, they're going to look for somebody else. If you are simply a company that does the repair or refurbish work and you don't move it or you don't help sell it, they're going to look for somebody else. So there's some major consolidation going on in that space. From our view in North America, there's a lot of growth in the offshore opportunities because there's some brands who may not want to liquidate in the United States. They don't want to hurt their brand. So they may choose to liquidate in Europe, Asia, South America, et cetera, where their brand is not as strong retail-wise, but they can get the products and collect a higher return on it. There's been some major investment of capital. I feel like I get a phone call or an email every week from financial organizations and other equity companies and consultants looking for companies to buy, to build, and create more of an end-to-end solution. I'm also proud that there's some green initiatives that are going on. Yesterday, one of our monthly committee meetings, the industry committees on recycling, had a presentation, very high level, about a new chemical process of breaking down products like electronics and break it down and easily recover the gold, palladium, and other precious metals without the destructiveness or the other costs, higher costs. So chemistry is becoming our friend in the green space. I mentioned the dangerous disposition option of the product stays with the consumer versus taking it back, but it's out there. And I really stress that. I know that some of those decisions are being made by MBA financial whiz kids that just came out of the business schools and say, this is the math, this is what works, without recognizing those other implications we mentioned. There is the re-commerce channel of consumer to consumer, C2C, pawn shops, garage sale, the social sharing. I'm always amazed when I go on Facebook and the marketplace pops up and offers me a television set or a Bluetooth speaker, but it's there. So it is, of course, very frightening that Facebook has that much data on me. They know every site I go to. They know when I happen to wander past Amazon to look for a Bluetooth speaker and suddenly they're popping up on my Facebook page. It's just crazy. Not finally, but I think very important, what's the impact to the planet? And I'm addressing some financial people that I hope recognize the importance of this area as well. The circular economy is becoming a big deal, a very big deal. Sustainability efforts to help the planet, companies are being measured now on their ESG. That's the new buzz term, environmental, social, governance models that they're using. And investors are looking at this now. They want to know the ESG score of companies. And that's amazing. And I'm grateful to see it. And I know that it will play more and more of a factor in the future when investment groups decide to get out of the oil companies and get into the recycling companies, et cetera. That's a rough example. But consumers are increasingly socially conscious of the impact that these goods are having, these returns. There's government legislation in process around the world, and that secondary market is growing and there. And that is the ultimate recycling is reusing a product. And I think that's very, very important. Again, I'll provide this presentation so you'll have some of these numbers for you to use at your company or wherever appropriate. But here's a scary number. The annual e-waste is on its way to growing to more than 75 million metric tons by 2030. And I know we're past 50 million metric tons. That was last year. So we're just going to see this number grow and grow. And it's frightening and it's shameful. And I'm proud of our members like the Dell, HP companies, Cisco, Intel, Acer. These are all board level members and global members, and they're trying to do something about it. And I won't get into that. Hopefully you can visit our website and see some of that. But I will pause here, take a breath, take a drink if you don't mind. Mute it for a second and say, do we have some questions out there?
Tony, I'll ask a question if no one else has one. You mentioned you reduced returns at Phillips by something like 2/3. It's not exactly the scope of your presentation. Just out of curiosity, how did you do that? You're on mute.
Yes, sorry, Michael. Michael, they said that there's no one silver bullet. There are many. The first one we learned was being a little bit of a traffic cop. We were allowing anything that we'd ever sold to come back for full credit. And that's the way the Walmart stores and the Kmart stores and the Target stores were operating around the turn of the centuries. Take anything back that they ever sold from anybody and give credit. So number one, traffic cop. Put up the barrier and say, if we didn't sell it or ship it to you in 2 years, we're not taking it back. That was number one. Number two, make the product easier to use. In the United States, I'm ashamed to say that our instruction books that we were printing overseas in 12 languages were not easy enough for people to read. And that's because Penn State informed us that the average American reads at a 6th grade level. Now, I'm sorry to say that, but I'm sure that's not too different from the rest of the parts of the world. And the goal is, how do you simplify the experience of using a product? Well, we learn when they open the package, you don't want a stop sign there that says, stop, don't take this back to the retailer, call us and we'll help you. We put in a gold star. Congratulations on your new Phillips purchase. Here's an easy quick start guide, steps 1, 2, 3, 4, with big pictures, big letters in English, how to use your product. And that was a major driver. Make things easier to use, exceed the customer's expectations, and they will be happy with you. That was another silver bullet. The biggest silver bullet, I think, was when we tracked the serial numbers. All electronics, as you can guess, have a serial number on the label next to the UPC. And we worked with a company that developed a system where at the point of sale in all these retail stores, they scanned the UPC and it told them to scan the serial number. At the returns desk, when they brought it back, same instructions: scan the UPC, scan the serial number to confirm when was it sold and where. Because many retailers, many consumers come back to the store without a receipt. So now we had an answer for the store to say, no, I'm sorry, this serial number was sold a year ago, is no longer eligible for return. Or number two, this serial number says it was sold by dealer XYZ, not our store, so you're gonna have to take it back there. That was a game changer.
I'm surprised that they didn't have that before. That doesn't seem very complicated.
I'll give you an example, Michael. It doesn't sound well, it is a bit complicated on the programming side because you have to capture that serial number. But here's the example I was given. You think about a major chain of stores, 1,000 stores, any brand store, and they got 50 registers each. And each register processing thousands and millions of transactions. And if each register has to do a second scan, they actually added up the number of seconds that were impacted because of their drive for efficiency. So it was a challenge, Michael, actually to overcome and say, yes, but this is important information. We had to do a test and show them that the savings on the reverse side at the returns desk, because that became more efficient, right? That the savings more than offset the cost of the extra seconds being used for the second scan at those, million plus registers across the country. I mean, that when you're dealing with high level companies that are global, Michael, every second is measured. So it took a while to get that across. We did that in the early 2000s and it was a game changer. And Michael, unfortunately, when the fulfillment centers are shipping out packages to consumers at their home, those serial numbers very often are not captured because, again, high speed processing is the key at these the online internet web companies that are selling out of a fulfillment center. They don't want the second scan to slow down that processing line. So that's going to take a while to overcome. But the brick and mortar, all the major retailers in the United States started to use it. So that was a major silver bullet. There's others. I'm not the most creative guy in the world. I always said I'm not a rocket scientist, but I don't mind borrowing from the best. And any ideas that we could find, for those of you who all use computers, you might notice that the world's been a nightmare for the last 20 years with the way the connections happen. It's been USB, it's been Apple standards, it's been different kinds of connections for power cords. If you lose your power cord, you go out looking, you can't go in a store anymore to get a universal cord. They don't exist. But I'm proud to say that I was part of the ease of use roundtable funded by Intel, Cisco, HP, Microsoft, Dell, Apple. And over the next few years, you're going to see a transition to this ubiquitous USB-C connector. If you have it now, you know it because it's one plug that does everything. Power, all USBs, everything. So imagine over the next 5 years, the gain to the world in this universal plug, eliminating the need for all these other cords. And of course, those will be thrown away and whatever will happen with them. But in the future, it won't be the nightmare of having to travel with 12 different cables and connectors in your bag. So there's all kinds of magic going on like that behind the scenes, Michael and others. So thanks for that question.
Thank you.
I do have a couple more slides. Again, if there's a question, I have no problem. I asked if I could put in a little plug. We are actually bringing the RLA back to Europe, the Europe, Middle East, Africa region. We have guests from all of those countries and areas, regions to attend in Amsterdam live June 22nd to 23rd at the Rye Auditorium in Amsterdam. This is our speaker list a week ago, so you can see companies like Bose and Intel and Sims and Dell and Canon and Cisco are all part of this. So we're doing that. I certainly hope if any of you are based in that region, you get a chance to look at our website and consider attending in person. Please visit rla.org. It's free to join the community. I do want to give an example of another silver bullet, Michael. LG. LG was part of the RLA. We got to be friends with the LG people back in the early 2000s, and they put in a simple program, very simple program of calling the consumer before any appliance was being delivered to the home. And they asked them to take a tape measure and measure the door that the product was going to come through. And it dropped the damage returns by more than 50%. And that doesn't sound, that should sound like a lot, but more important, they also empowered their agents on a call center. Let's say you got a washer or dryer or both delivered to your house, and the truck people, you didn't measure correctly, it bumps against the door, there's a little scratch or dent or nick or streak on it, but it was going to be hidden against the wall, but you weren't happy. They would get you on the line with a call center agent who's empowered to offer you a certain amount of money as a credit for keeping the one that they delivered. And if they offered you, and you paid $1,000 for this, and they offered you 100, you might say, sure, I'll keep it. So that's the kind of things that they took, the steps that they took, because they knew if they had to take that washer or dryer back or refrigerator back to the warehouse, they were going to have to sell it at a loss, and the loss was going to be X dollars, and then redelivering was going to be X dollars. So let's offer the consumer enough money to offset that. Just smart, in creative, outside the box thinking, right? I mean, imagine coming to one of you as a finance person and saying, hey, we want to offer a consumer $100 to keep something. You're like, wait a minute. But if you explain the savings potential, it all adds up. So that was LG, and that's been implemented by LG with many retailers, but also many other brands picked this up. The Samsungs, the Whirlpools, etc. They picked up the idea as well. This is an eye chart. Let me bounce back to, let me just, people don't understand what it really means if you can reduce returns. And this is, again, for the finance people in the group. If you have sales of $1 billion and you can reduce your returns rate was 10%, double the numbers for Phillips. You have 100 million in returns. If you can reduce the return rate by 20% to an 8% level, you've got 20 million in reduced returns. And if your company has a gross margin of 20%, which is high for electronics, by the way, you've created an additional 4 million in incremental profit. So when people think they can't afford it, can you afford not to do it? Because you're improving customer service, you're increasing customer loyalty. I mean, I had a department of 6 people. I used to think it was quite an investment, but then when you looked at saving the company 4 million or more a year, and my department was maybe 250,000. So it's an important investment. And I hope that everyone on the finance side will look at this slide and use it, because it applies to many, many places. All right. Michael, I didn't pause very much. I hope you and Charlotte and the rest of the listeners, if there were any other questions, I can be reached very easily. In fact, I think I'll go back to that front slide and show that as the last slide here.